Okay, so before I get into my top 10 games of this generation, I just want to say that there will be some omissions that many do consider games of this generation. That's just simply down to the fact that I've not played all the great games of this generation, or I haven't played enough of them to form a critical opinion at the time of making this video. So there'll be some omissions like Nier Automata, Return of the Obra Dinn, Disco Elysium, and Mario Odyssey. Now, some of the games that I have chosen will have some larger discussions than others, but overall I am happy with the games that I have chosen. But I would just let it be known that this was very difficult to organise where they ended up on the list. I'd say the only ones that are cemented in their places are the top 2. Any of the others can be moved around the board, and just because a game is ranked lower does not mean I enjoyed it any less. So before that's out of the way, and before I dive into the top 10 games that I've chosen, there are a few honourable mentions that I do want to give credit to.
You find his stash. You bring it to me. To me, Deke. You do that, we'll see what we can do for you.
Deke, bro.
And I know what kind of man he is. What he's done. He done any worse than you? Ricky? How about me?
What? No chit-chat or monologue? Just getting right to the point, huh?
Every parcel is a promise made to a person in need. And they're counting on you to deliver.
Okay, so to kick things off, coming in at 10th place is Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, the latest entry in the From Software catalogue of games, and this takes their gameplay in a different direction than the Soulsborne series of games that they have made their name with. This isn't to say it's a bad thing, it's quite the opposite. The best description I could give this game is Tenchu meets Bloodborne. It mixes fast-paced, relentless combat with stealth-based ninja mechanics, which is not something people who go into the game after the Soulsborne games would expect. I love this game for being something different than FromSoft's usual formula of games. It's much more action orientated than RPG orientated, and as someone who considers himself good at the Soulsborne games, this game was very challenging for me as I had to forget the natural instinct I had built up in those games and adapt to the new systems that the game was teaching me. Now, one of my favourite things about this game is it is challenging and it will kick your ass. It is hard. But the physics engine and combat system are polished, and there are no bullshit quick time events, timed missions or escort missions. Just you against enemies who can kill you in 3 or 4 hits. The fact that this isn't Dark Souls is one of the reasons I like Sekiro. I mean, the first Dark Souls game continues one of my most beloved experiences in gaming. That being said, we've had several of those already, more if you throw in Demon's Souls and the upcoming Demon's Souls remake. And I'm happy to see that From Software are trying something different. Not that Sekiro is totally different, mind you. You still get that solitary, melancholic vibe when journeying through its ruined, war-torn landscape. Is it hard in Dark Souls? That's subjective. I think traversing its landscape and dealing with the basic mobs in the game is easier, thanks to your superior mobility and ability to dispense of minor foes more often. The mid-bosses and boss fights, however, on the other hand, I think are genuinely tougher. Much tougher. And that's because Sekiro's big baddies require you to take a lot of decisions, sometimes in a split second in order to survive. At the top of the list is the parrying system, which is so vital to the game. One reason why parrying is important is because it helps you break down an enemy's posture alongside your regular attacks. Basically, foes in Sekiro have a health bar and a posture bar that work in conjunction with each other. Lowering an enemy's health, for example, allows you to build up a foe's posture bar faster with your strikes and parries. Once this posture bar is filled out, Sekiro can perform a death strike that automatically empties an opponent's life bar. If an enemy only has 1 life bar, however, that ends the fight right there. If there are multiple, then you'll have to repeat the process. Some foes are also susceptible to stealth blows that can quickly take out one of those said life bars, usually at the start of the fight. Now, while parrying is technically a defensive move, however, it is also an aggressive form of defense. That's because it requires you to pretty much stand in the face of danger all the way up to the last second before responding. It's not too bad when facing peons and minor foes with predictable patterns. Later on though, you'll face bosses that like to use attack combinations with different kinds of timing in order to throw you off. It doesn't take long before you meet enemies that start mixing in moves that can't be parried. These are preceded by a danger sign requiring you to either dash evade against thrusts or jump in the air against ground sweeps. And as you progress the game, you can also learn a Mikiri counter, which requires you to dash forward into an attack to counter it. Your ability to react properly to these various attacks ultimately determines how well you do in the game. Granted, this game won't be for everyone, including some Soulsborne fans. For starters, you don't have the same diversity in classes, weapons or playstyles. Sekiro pretty much forces you to play the game in a certain way, and if that way ain't your cup of tea, well, you're going to have a problem. It does have that extra element of stealth though, which is fun if you prefer doing that instead of bum rushing your foes along the way, which you can still do. The game is also really difficult and punishingly so, particularly since it doesn't have a lot of hand-holding. It will give you hints here and there, but you pretty much have to figure out the nuances of most boss fights yourself. It can take multiple tries since bosses can take you down fast, sometimes in just one move, before you even get a chance to learn anything. Now the reason this is at number 10 spot is because unlike Soulsborne games, Sekiro does lack a bit of replayability, more in regards to the build variety mentioned previously. The only variety really is what tools you can use. Maybe this will be fixed with the upcoming October update, which adds in a boss rush mode and a few more new additions. Now, speaking of boss fights, it would be criminal to not talk about the amazing boss fights featured in this game, ranging from Lady Butterfly to the Guardian Ape to Sword Saint Yushin. Some of my favourite boss fights in my time playing games are featured in Sekiro, especially Sword Saint Yushin, who gave me my hardest time in this game, maybe any game I've played. This boss feels like a final boss, from the setting to the music to the fight itself. This boss fight makes sure you have to utilise everything you have learnt across your journey in an exhilarating final climax to a superb game that comes in at number 10 spot in my games of this generation. Divinity Original Sin 2 was a big surprise to me when I first purchased it. I'd heard good things whilst it was in early access and decided to purchase it when it reached full release. I made it out of Fort Joy and then this massive expansive open world opened up to me. And then I dropped it for almost 7 months. This isn't a slight on the game however, it just didn't click for me at that point in time. Upon my return though, I started a new build, a typical warrior build that was complemented by my chosen companions. Before I knew it, I was 60 hours deep and barely into the second island of the game. This is because the world building in this game is one of the best I've ever come across. Each character you talk to has this vibrant aura to them, especially the key players in the story, even some of the side characters that some people may never even meet. This was my first experience with a CRPG, and I do not think I could have chosen a better game to introduce myself to the genre. The starting area, Fort Joy, did a fantastic job of introducing the mechanics of how the combat works. The combat in this game is super satisfying feel to it. The game's toughest encounters force you to scout out the battlefield, position your characters properly and use the terrain to your advantage. Sometimes that might mean grouping your party in a circle and teleporting enemies to you. Other times it might mean smashing oil barrels and using a fireball on them to set an entire field ablaze. Now when you're not in combat, you're exploring the brilliant designed open world as I mentioned previously, and side quests. The companion characters who follow you on your journey, who you can choose depending on how you want to build your party to tackle the combat side of things, are particularly lively, offering their own side quests and chiming in with thoughts and banter after every major plot revelation and battle. Even the little moments are fantastic. There's the crab who thinks he's an all-powerful wizard, the dog who turns out to be a demon, and even some emotional ones such as a lover who is looking for his lover only to realise he had killed him in a blind range of dark magic and asked the party to end his pain. One thing that does help this game of this size is that there are no boring battles or tedious quests. Every combat encounter feels staged and deliberate, whilst almost every quest has enough wrinkles or twists to be worthwhile. Divinity Original Sin 2 is an amazing game that would be higher on the list if I probably played through it more than once during the time I've owned it. Still one of the best games of this generation that I've played though. Every minute of this game kept my brain engaged. There's no going on autopilot or mindlessly mashing buttons while you play this game. You have to make choices constantly, who to recruit, how to solve disputes, what sort of abilities to give each character and so on. Just about every quest can be finished in multiple ways, and they all work together in an unexpected, delightful fashion, sometimes with weighty consequences. It is all these elements that mix together to make this one of my favourite games of this generation. Persona 5 The Royal takes place at the base game of Persona 5 would have. The Royal, like many other Persona games, is the more refined version of the base game that came before it, but adds to the game in so much more, including more personas, side quests, characters, and an entirely new semester in the school system, alongside a brand new ending. The premise of Persona 5 is you can play as a teenage boy in Japan who is falsely accused of a crime and ends up with a criminal record. You make friends with kids who have been screwed over by evil adults, discover the power that makes those evil adults feel remorse and confess their crimes, and set about trying to save the world. But what sets Persona 5 apart from other RPGs this generation is just how much it makes you play the role of a high school teenager. You can't just spend your time in the palaces and mementos fighting and recruiting powerful personas. You need to make sure you put aside extra time in the real world to keep up with your studies to do well in your semester exams, work part-time jobs to gain money and information on potential targets, and build up relationships with those around you in-game. These confidants each have their own ranks that you build up and receive rewards to aid you in your side of the game, whether that be making coffee to replenish your SP levels, or being able to craft higher level personas in the Velvet Room. Persona 5 The Royal makes a lot of tweaks to improve the experience for the player of the base game, such as allowing gun ammunition to replenish every fight instead of having a set amount of bullets to last the entire palace duration. The boss fights in Royal are notably reworked and largely for the better. Bosses that used to cycle back and forth repeatedly between two forms, like the Twisted Art dealer Madarame, now present each form only once, or introduce new forms that make more sense within the narrative of the enemy in the question. Having Madarame create increasingly poor counterfeit copies of himself, for example, feels more fitting and a way to spice up the flow of the boss fight I already knew so well, while blending really nicely with his character arc. Now it would be impossible to talk about Persona 5 without talking about the fantastic art style and soundtrack. These are the first two things to catch my eye when I first saw Persona 5 in its trailer, with its art style and its soundtrack. The artists use more colour with less distinction to detail, which lets your mind fill the gaps and gives it that suave look. Very classy, but also very cool. This is complemented by a superb soundtrack that you find hard to dislike. The soundtrack in the base game was fantastic enough, but then Atlus added even more in the Royal, which is just icing on the cake, and lends itself to the various scenarios that the game puts forward, whether it be wandering around Shibuya, exploring a palace, or fighting off one of the game's climactic boss battles. By the time my journey had come to a close with the story and characters of Persona 5 The Royal, it was just as bittersweet as the first time around, and as it tries to ease you into the end with heartfelt scenes, some new and some familiar, but in doing so only makes it hard to say goodbye again. Persona 5 Royal is many things. A collection of small inspiring stories, an ambitious harrowing journey with some good friends, a stunning visual and auditory experience, a resounding call to action. By refining what was already great and building on its best qualities with its brilliant new story arc, Persona 5 Royal asserts itself as an unforgettable and empowering RPG that should be recognised as one of the best games of this generation. Okay, so it would have been hard to make a top 10 list of my favourite games this generation and not have Monster Hunter World in it. This game is one of the more interesting on the list, as when I first touched the beta that released shortly before its official release date, I wasn't the biggest fan, so much as to uninstall the very same day. Then, a few weeks later, the first impressions and reviews of the full release came out and they all gave the game fantastic reviews and accolades. That got me thinking maybe I was a bit harsh on the game. Release week came and some of my friends were planning to play it on release day, so I decided, why the hell not? Fast forward to the end of my first full day playing, I did not realise I had sat there and played the game for 12 hours. Now, once that play session had ended, I was only thinking of one thing, the next hunt. This is what makes this game so great. It's a simple gameplay loop of find monster, hunt monster, make weapons and armour from said monster and repeat. It's an addicting gameplay loop. It's the constant unlocking of new content that makes this game so addicting once you get familiar with its gameplay cycle. Very few times does a hunt end without the next quest immediately introducing a new monster. Occasionally the game does send you on some grindier investigations in order to unlock the next monster, but these are usually pretty quick affairs. This means you're rarely hunting the same monster repeatedly unless you want to. After every monster you can go to the blacksmith and see what new armour or weapons you can make. This is probably unreasonably exciting for me, but I love that feeling of finishing a hunt and immediately running to the blacksmith to see what new armour I could make. In many RPGs, these types of rewards are random. The boss could drop this gear to unique to the fight, but will it? Who knows. In fairness, you will probably have to fight the monster a few times to get all the materials for a full armour set, but at the very least, you know exactly what you're going to get when you've got necessary crafting materials. You also don't even have to make the whole armour set if you just want a few pieces from it. This allows for the mixing and matching of armour pieces that allow you to craft specific sets of armour for specific hunts, such as focusing on a health boost to give your hunter more HP and allow them to take more damage on the hunt. Now, regarding those drop materials though, I will concede that sometimes monsters just will not drop the materials you need from them. This does involve fighting the same monster several times, but there are some mechanics in the game that alleviate the grind. For starters, you can choose to capture monsters instead of killing them. This increases the number of rewards and or the occurrence of specific rewards. Breaking a specific part of the monster will also grant you the materials associated with it. These mechanics allow for a little more control over what you're specifically getting. You also gain some amount of resource if you fail. I've had a few occasions where I went into a hunt needing a few specific resources and then failed, but the resources I needed still dropped, so even failure is somewhat rewarded in this game, although success is always a much preferred option. Now the hunt is only one focal point of the game. The other comes the preparation phase that takes place before the hunt, where you need to craft the necessary potions and equipment that will make your life much easier in hunting these behemoths. This is where a lot of the depth comes in, as Monster Hunter has a deep crafting and gathering system. While exploring some of the larger zones, you'll encounter all manner of smaller beasts and local flora that can be harvested to create necessary consumable items. Herbs, for example, are turned into life restoring potions, but if you gather some honey from a bee's nest, you can create a much more powerful mega potion. It's simple in that most items only take 1 or 2 ingredients to craft, but there's almost 100 items that are useful on your hunts. Blue mushrooms and bitter bugs can be combined to make antidotes to heal poison. Ivy and spider webs can be combined to make nets, which, combined with a store-bought trap tool, can make a net trap capable of pinning a monster down for some time. These consumables are necessary because the monsters you hunt are vicious. Not only do they hit like a truck, but many also inflict deadly blights that eat away at your stamina or health. Each one also possesses amazing agility, and you want to use items to pin them down so you can score hits, especially if you're using slow weapons like the Great Sword and Hammer. This preparation phase also extends to actions you perform back in the safety of the village. Here you'll cook meals to boost your stats, manage a farm that passively grows crafting items that you might need, craft and tinker with armor sets to provide various passive bonuses as mentioned earlier, and set out complete optional quests that don't directly involve hunting, like gathering a certain resource or exploring a new area. This is all a prelude to help give you an edge in the white-knuckled fights against the deadly beast stalking the wilds. This is why Monster Hunter World is one of my favourite games of this generation. Even hundreds of hours on this game, sometimes I will forget an item that would make my hunt go smoother, such as forgetting an antidote and fireproof mantle when facing off against a Rathian. The execution phase is where Monster Hunter truly shines. While people often liken the combat to Dark Souls because of its slow weighted pace, it's far more akin to a basic fighting game. Each of the 14 extremely diverse weapons in Monster Hunter World have their own combos to memorise, and there's a satisfying amount of depth to how you can string these combos together. What makes Monster Hunter so thrilling is that you're leveraging a deep combat system against monsters that are equally as deep. Each one behaves differently in battle and you'll always feel like they're struggling to keep up with their attacks. The Tsiyaku has retractable frills that emit bursts of light that will stun your character if you look at them, while the Polumu is a rat-like wyvern that inflates its neck to float around and fire bursts of pressurised air to knock you down. When attacking, you need to be smart about where to focus your damage. Every monster has a weak spot and organs that can be destroyed, limiting their abilities while also providing extra materials for armour crafting. One thing I did not expect when I first played this game is how much you can form a relationship with these monsters. What's fascinating about this is like Pokemon, I began to develop a deeply personal relationship with certain monsters the more you fight them. Each one is so distinct, so packed full of personality, that they ascend beyond mere video game bosses and become something more. Like a real hunter, you quickly learn to respect the creatures and the power they hold. It's that unique cycle of preparation, execution and reward that makes Monster Hunter World such a fun game. and a compelling experience that inspires players to sink hundreds of hours into each game. Similar to Pokemon, as mentioned before, Monster Hunter is a time-tested formula for fun, but keeps things fresh by adding new monsters and worlds to explore for each new game. There's so much depth for each system that mastering every weapon and crafting every set could keep you playing for months. What's better, Monster Hunter World has benefited from a constant string of post-launch DLC. It's always free, adding new monsters, challenges and fun crossover armor styles from other games like The Witcher and Resident Evil 2. Now with the release of the paid expansion Iceborne, the game has only gotten bigger, adding a brand new area and hub, new mechanics such as the Clutch Claw, and most importantly new monsters, of which comes new gear. A bunch of fan favourites from the series have made their return in Iceborne such as Barioth and Rajang, which I'm only just meeting for the first time. As someone who has played for years now, Monster Hunter has become one of my beloved series, and while its combat or crafting won't appeal to everyone, those looking for a rich and deep multiplayer action RPG that lets you grind at your own pace should give it a try. This game has been a constant for me since its release date, and that is why I felt it would be an injustice for it not to make it onto this list. I've already done a previous video on why I think Outer Wilds is such a great game, so I'll try and keep this entry short. This game is hands down one of the best at rewarding exploration. At the start of the game you know virtually nothing about this solar system you're about to explore, but by the end, not only do you know its beginnings but also its end. This is not through the game telling you to do so, it is through intricate pieces of information that you have put together whilst going from planet to planet and coming to your own conclusions on where to head next and why. I'm still hesitant to say too much to make sure not to spoil anything about this game for anyone who watches the video. It's how much I care about this game and the experience it provides, especially when the musical score starts to rise and you truly know you're about to put all of the dots together, and you know the final journey and your makeshift shuttle is upon you. It's at that moment it's hard not to get tears in your eyes. Outer Wilds is a true masterpiece of this generation, and I really do hope more people get to experience this wonderfully crafted game. I'm just a bit scared that the players of this generation are too used to being told what to do and where to go, and not willing to play a game that gives you little to no information on just what to do, and make the journey themselves.